Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Kurzke. I'm a developer advocate for Google TV, and I'll be giving you a quick preview of new and exciting things coming in Google TV. Just for my curiosity, how many of you actually are Android developers? And okay, great. So, and I hope you all have had a chance maybe to take a look at it over on the show floor. We're actually showing the new version of Google TV. It's not out yet. You may have heard about Google TV launched last year. It was based on Eclair. So the new version is based on Android 3. It's Android Honeycomb. So what I'm going to cover today is first give a very high-level overview of what Google TV is, more from a user's point of view, and then look at what input devices you have available, some UI guidelines, some design patterns, and then go into some of the more developer-relevant topics, like how can you develop, how can you migrate maybe your existing app, and then lastly, how can you, once you've done all this, how can you get the app into market? So first question that a lot of people have is, what is Google TV? And I think the best way to explain Google TV is really it's Android on a really large screen. It's basically the Android framework running on a TV in your home. And it can either be integrated directly into the TV. So Sony has a couple devices, one of them we're showing here, where the Android framework runs inside your TV, or it can be part of a set-top box. There is a Sony Blu-ray player, or there is a Logitech set-top box. They also run the Android platform. What you'll see here is what the main screen looks like. We have a bunch of application shortcuts in the bottom. So this will give quick access to the user for the most frequently used applications that they need. And on top of it, you actually have Android widgets. So if you're an Android developer, you're probably familiar the way widgets work. You can put them on your phone screen. The same APIs, the same widgets are available on Google TV. And for a developer, it's actually a really exciting opportunity to get up-to-date information to the end user. The other thing I would like to point out is, no mouse cursor here. So this little notification icon here, it shows that there's 3 incoming notifications. On your Android phone, you have a little status bar on top for things like incoming tweets, incoming emails. So on TV also, the user, when they watch TV, they see notifications. And it's, again, for a developer, it's the same API. It's the Android Notifications API. The other frequently used interface for a TV is people want to find stuff. Users have sort of gotten used to more the internet concept where you know what you want to watch and you just basically quickly search, get to content. So Google TV has a search function built in. It's on the back end, it's powered by the Google search engine. I think we have some pretty good technology for that. And on the client side, there is also the opportunity for applications and for developers to contribute search results. So if you know the Android search provider API, so any application can include a search provider, and the user can include, when they install the app, they can include the search provider in the results. So if you have, for example, something like a music application and somebody searches for a song, your app can also contribute search results to this. And for the end user, the result is they have all the relevant information really aggregated in one place. So a third topic that I don't want to cover in too much detail, but you can explore yourself if you go to the HTTP GTV gallery, appspot.com. We also have optimized HTML applications, and Google TV has a full Chrome browser, and a lot of developers have existing HTML5 content which is optimized for TV, and we actually encourage you to check out our gallery. We have a bunch of applications, or a bunch of web applications which we highlight, which are optimized for TV. And it's a very quick and easy way, if you already have content on the web, to make it available to people in their homes on their largest screen. If you're interested in a live demo, stop by. We are over in the big relax area, and we have TV set up, and we're giving demos there. So first of all, let's see how do users interact with TVs. And I think some of you may be old enough to remember, I mean, at some point in history, somebody walked in a store, and this was the most exciting and newest thing they could find, and they were really excited to bring this home. And the user interface was basically a bunch of buttons on the bottom of the TV. And if you remember that time, somebody always had to get off the couch and change channels. Usually that was me. So I saw a touchscreen TV over on the other hall. So some people put touch interfaces on TV. I don't really think this will work in a living room environment because you have to put down your beer, you have to get off the couch, you have to walk up and touch stuff on the screen. So for that reason, we think remote controls are really the way to go in the future. So people have gotten used to sitting on the couch using a remote. It's also pretty painful when you have to enter anything more than just 2 or 3 characters of text. So for Google TV, we want people to enter information. We want TV to be interactive. So all Google TV devices will have a full keyboard. So it makes it very easy to update your Google Plus status, or maybe check your email, or just enter search queries. And all Google TV devices, besides having a keyboard, they also have what we call the D-pad. It's the directional pad. It's the up, down, left, right. Some people call it cursor keys. And it has some sort of a touch interface for mouse cursor simulation. But applications should really not rely on the mouse interface. Applications should really rely more on the up, down, left, right. So there's seats still available in the front if you guys want to come forward. So the other input device that everybody has in their pocket nowadays, hopefully, is a smartphone. So there is actually applications available that turn either an iPhone or an Android phone into a remote control for your Google TV. And the interesting thing is the protocol is based on, it's over wireless, over IP. So if you're curious, we open source the source code for the remote control app, and also the protocol and libraries to implement the protocol. You can find it on a code.google.com TV remote project or Google TV remote. So if you're curious, if you want to write an application that has a really cool, sophisticated user interface and hook it into Google TV, you can just get started with that today. The other actually exciting opportunity for developers is create applications that run on different devices. And I'll talk a little bit about this more later, where it's not just the TV. You don't just look at the TV, but you tie in all the other devices that a user has. So maybe when they're out on the road, they can use the cell phone, and when they sit on the couch, they use the tablet and the TV at the same time. So when we think about TV users or people who watch TV, it's usually in a living room. It's sort of a relaxed environment with a remote control. They didn't let me put a beer in there. It's the American version. So, and I internationalized that. We call it 10-foot experience, but it's really here, it's the 3.05 meter experience. So, a couple of guidelines. So, how should you design your application? And I think really one of the more interesting things for TV applications, the biggest difference is sometimes in the user interaction and in the user design. Because people, when they use a laptop or when they use a tablet, they're much closer to it. They want to interact much closer. On TV, you're usually sitting in your living room. You're relaxed. You just want to be entertained. So as a developer, you should really figure out what is the core of your application and make it super easy, make it very simple. I've seen music player apps that take 7 or 8 clicks just to play the first song. It's a bad experience for the user. Group your controls, group your content together. It's all pretty standard UI design. Basically throw out everything that's not really essential to your application. Make it easy to get to the core of why the user started your app. And then be consistent. Stick with one navigation mode. Basically a user, they use a bunch of applications. They're not only using your application. They want a simple, easy way navigate through an application. And take advantage of existing web metaphors and Android metaphors. And I think if we summarize this, it's really all about focus on what's essential, throw out everything else. Like, really. I mean, there is a company who basically says, you know, product is not done until there is nothing else you can possibly remove. And keep your app simple. So then the other thing to keep in mind is most applications, or let's just say most devices which you guys write applications for, are really personal devices. If you write a cell phone application or write a tablet application, it's usually one user who uses the app, and when somebody starts your app, you know it's that guy who logged in. TVs are incredibly social. You have one in your living room right now, and somebody may or may not be watching. Maybe your kids are watching. It's also, for application developers, keep in mind that there's a lot of privacy around your app, maybe. So if you have a Twitter client and on a phone, it's like, yeah, send me a notification every time a tweet comes in. If I don't look at the phone, I'll just ignore it, whatever. If I'm in a meeting, I turn it on mute. There's tweets coming in. I don't care. When I'm watching a movie, I really don't want to have incoming tweets. It's like, don't show me a pop-up on the screen every time one of my friends sends me something. The other thing is really focus, again, on what's essential for your app. If you have something like a social network client and you have the capability to send personal messages, like direct messages, maybe on Saturday when you're watching TV with your buddies, you don't want your, whatever, new girlfriend's DMs showing up on screen. So you want to be, as a developer, you want to give a user an easy way to, for example, mute notifications or set certain priorities and say, okay, don't ever show incoming tweets unless I enter my password again. The other thing to sort of keep in mind is, for a 10-foot experience, everything needs to be much larger. And the TV is an incredibly large device. And when you think about writing apps for the TV, you're probably excited because you have all this space available. And it's very tempting to fill it with a lot of buttons and make it look like, you know, something that can launch a space shuttle. But typically, when you watch TV, and I think my advice is really consciously watch television and see how, for example, news services show information. They usually show very small, like small sound bites of information. They don't show everything at once. Having empty space on a TV is incredibly nice. You don't have to fill every pixel with content. And what we found works nice is have a navigation scheme that works sort of left to right. Put high-level things to the left and then navigate more to the right. When you create graphics assets, the other thing to keep in mind is, since the TV is very large, it has 1900 by 1080 pixels, it's very tempting to just have a lot of buttons and a lot of stuff rendered for that resolution. It takes up a lot of memory. So if you think about it, a full-screen background with a complex graphic takes you immediately 8 megabytes of RAM. And eventually, you'll run out of heap space pretty quickly with your app if you have a bunch of backgrounds that you, for example, shift around, or you don't use 9-patch images, and every button has its own background image. The most frequent error that I've seen for apps crashing on Google TV is running out of memory. So be very conscious. 9-patches are an amazingly useful tool for Android, for Google TV. So as developers, my advice is really use 9-patches. I've seen a lot of really great apps that fail on Google TV because they ran out of memory. And it's not just for 10-foot experience. It's a good idea for all Android apps, especially as we get into tablets. Tablets also have large screens. 9-patches are your friend. And then, in terms of colors, you shouldn't really use bright white. It's also something where usually TVs are watched in the evening. It's like the lights are off. It's dim in the room. The last thing you want is start up an app and there's like a blindingly white background. Simplify the category navigation. Again, keep it simple. and select focus and basically have a focus state and a selected state. Animations are always nice. What I find, we do a lot of feedback from users and a lot of like user interaction testing. Every time users see that something on TV stops moving, they immediately think something is broken. TVs are supposed to be moving around. So one of the apps, for example, we can show it to you when you come over. We have a Discovery Channel app, and as a background, they started out with a static map. And it was okay, it looked good, but then they changed the static map to just an animated video loop that shows like clouds moving around and stuff moving on the screen, and their app immediately got a better feedback. So, as I said earlier, use the D-pad navigation, and keep in mind the device is a landscape device. So, a lot of Android developers, when you create your app, you always assume it's for a phone and it's portrait mode. Sometimes landscape is a little bit of an afterthought. You just use the automatic Android layout managers to rearrange your layout. For TV, really, landscape is the only way. We tried initially to emulate it with like sidebars and stuff, but right now, basically, if your app forces landscape mode, it won't run actually on Google TV. And also, Flash and video does not work in web views. So Google TV, we have Chrome, full Chrome browser. So it supports, of course, Flash, and it supports HTML5 video tags. But the Android web view does not support this. So if you, as an Android developer, embed Flash content through a web view or something, that won't work on Google TV. Another topic that, honestly, when I started, I thought this was history, but unfortunately, it's still with us. Even high-end digital televisions today still have the concept of overscan, where you don't actually see all the pixels on the screen. So if your application has hard-coded assumptions about the screen size, your application may actually not work well. And if you have buttons somewhere on the corner of the screen, the buttons may actually be clipped off. I could talk about 2.5 hours about all the problems you run into, but just believe me. Make your application scale dynamically. As Android developers, you have the ability, when you do a full screen canvas, you have the ability to just fill the visible screen area. And the downside is you just don't know exactly how big it is. Depending on which TV you're running on, you will have to dynamically adapt to it. On the good side, this is a good programming practice anyways, because phones also come in all kinds of different screen sizes. So once you get it right for phones, it's also going to work for TV. The good thing is if you use the Android layout mechanisms, you can use like relative layouts. You can position things dynamically on the screen. Just make sure your graphics designers leave a little bit of white space. And that goes back to what I said earlier. Don't use every single last pixel on the screen for your application. Leave some areas where you can dynamically adjust and scale. So how do we develop on this? So what are some of the types of applications? So frequently developers come and say, hey, do I need to create yet another app for Google TV? I already have one for phone, why do I need another one? And I think it totally depends on the app, but if your app makes sense on a TV, there is no technical reason why you need different binaries or different applications. If you do all the things sort of the Android way, you don't have any hard-coded assumptions, your app should run fine across all Android devices, including Google TV. Sometimes it makes sense to split functionality. So you may have a companion app. You may have, for example, something that requires GPS, which really doesn't make sense on a TV. But you may have, something like a, dashboard, like, where your mobile app checks in. And then, of course, you can do a TV-only application if you really want to. And sometimes, some of the apps, they are very optimized. They have a lot of video content, and it may not make sense to have those on mobile. When you create apps, keep in mind Google TV right now, it does not support the native development kit. So if you have any C code or any native libraries, your app, unfortunately, will not work on Google TV today. It also has a lot fewer sensors. I mean, it's probably not good to say no sensors, but we don't have accelerometers, we don't have barometers, we don't have a GPS. So we have a lot less than you would expect on a phone. And unfortunately, since it's a lower cost device, it's also actually less powerful CPU-wise than phones or tablets. And combine that with a larger screen, you will have some performance issues. So you really need to optimize your app for graphics performance. The other thing that you should keep in mind as a developer is broadband is available through Wi-Fi and Ethernet. I've seen a bunch of apps that I tried out where developers basically query the connection manager and they check, hey, do I have Wi-Fi? Oh, I don't have Wi-Fi. OK, good. Then they assume automatically that you don't have a broadband connection, and maybe they only run with limited content. I tested one app. It's like a video, it's a home video camera thing, like surveillance camera, home security. And when it's not connected over Wi-Fi, it assumes it's not in the house, and it doesn't actually work. And TVs usually are connected over Ethernet. So make sure when you check the connection manager, you query for that. In terms of resolutions, as a developer, you're probably familiar with all the different screen sizes and resolutions for Android devices. And this is sort of an overview of where Google TV falls in the world. And it actually is a large screen. It's not an extra large screen. And the reason is, if you hold a tablet at the normal reading distance and you look at a TV, the TV in the distance actually is smaller than the tablet. And people are used to having 10-point fonts on their tablet, but they want larger fonts on their TV. So the decision was to rather have a larger resolution. So our TVs have a sort of perceived or virtual resolution of 320 dpi for the high resolution, but they're only counted as a large screen. And if you do the math with the Android display-independent pixels with DPs, you have about as many DPs as you have on a, say, Nexus 1. If you want to put specific resources for Google TV in your Android application, you can just use the extra high-density resources, or you can, for example, put it in extra high-density no-touch. So that would be specific for Google TV. We also have the TV DPI, so that is the 720p resolution for the lower resolution or standard resolution TVs. When you test your app, make sure you test it on different TV settings, color settings. Make sure you test it on different screens. Like sometimes low-quality TVs have, they pixelate more. Your resolutions may look a little bit funny. And really test for different overscan settings. One thing that I want to mention is location. I said earlier we don't have a GPS, but we actually do have the location that the user entered when they set up the TV. And usually in the US we have zip codes. It's like postal codes that you enter when you set up your TV. And the location manager has a location provider. It's the static location provider, which will return the geolocation of the zip code. So it's not good enough to really do some actual location-based stuff. So if you need to get the exact location, you won't get a lot of precision. But if you just want to show, for example, the weather forecast for this particular area, or you want to give a rough, you get a rough idea where the TV is located, that is also available to you. So now, some advice on UIs. So this is a typical Google TV application. It's basically a little photo viewer or video viewer app. We have this side navigation bar where the user can select some topics, and then on the left or on the right you see the individual videos available for that topic. If you implement this as a tablet application, the user can immediately click on one of the keynotes or one of the presentations over there, and you don't need to worry about highlighting states or highlighting focus. On a TV application, you actually need to sort of indicate what you're looking at here, which tab is highlighted, or you need to indicate where the focus is. Oops, there we go. So Android already gives you mechanisms to highlight focus, but a lot of developers, when you create tablet apps, they don't provide all the necessary assets for things like highlighted focus states. So I'm going to get into this in a second. Also, when you navigate, make sure your grid is laid out sort of logical, so that with just left, right, bottom, you can actually get through your application. It's always much easier to just touch stuff on the screen than move a cursor around. So for focus, so in Android, you can actually specify focusable events, and you can have state focus, true, false, and so on. So you need to make sure you provide drawables for all your screen resources in all those different states. So I've seen also apps that I tested which worked fine, except they didn't have a focused state, and then you can navigate it, but you never know where you are. So what you really need to provide is focus states, and then also Android does have an automatic, basically it automatically tries to guess where the user wants to go when you move left or right or up and down. And if you have a regular grid layout, that works fine, but sometimes your UI is not organized as a grid. There may be different list views next to each other. So sometimes the default assumptions may not always work. So as a developer, you can override the defaults, and you can specify the next focus left, next focus right, focus up, focus forward, which is basically tab. And there's nothing more annoying than going, for example, through an application, filling out text boxes, and you hit, say, next, you hit the tab key, and you end up like 4 or 5 boxes forward, or you don't end up where you think you would end up. Like when I enter username and password, I hit tab. I really want to get to the OK button, and I don't want to get somewhere else. So when you design your app, always keep in mind how you lay out this grid, what goes where. I sometimes see applications where if you are, say, on this field here and you press cursor right, it's not quite clear, should you jump up, should you jump down? You should do something. You shouldn't just not allow a cursor right in this position here. And also keep in mind, you can only go in squares. You can't do any shortcuts. So in summary, the 10-foot UI, it's consuming content, it's sort of a mix between computer and TV, and you also have usually sound and simple and visible navigation. So that's actually another thing I want to briefly touch on. In your application, for example, on phone, I see a lot of apps starting to use the vibrate thing, the whatever vibrate mode, to indicate stuff like, you know, you selected a button or you triggered some action. Think about using sound more in your application. You don't have the vibration capability on a phone, on a TV remote, but you can actually just give feedback and maybe play some sounds. So the way we recommend to lay out your application, what I've seen works really well, is having this global context and detail columns and really using the width of the user interface. One thing that does not, or one thing that works very well is if you have, for example, buttons on the left and on the right, and you have a list view in the middle, the left, right, up, down navigation works really well. A bad example would be this here, where you have, say, tabs on top, buttons on the bottom, and you have a list in the middle. And imagine you go into the list and you want to scroll through your friends, maybe highlight a few friends, and then you want to send an email to all your friends. Now, in order to get to the button, you have to scroll all the way down through the list to get to the buttons. On a tablet, it's very easy because you can just click a few friends and then click down here without scrolling all the way down. So sometimes it's just really layout considerations like this which make a big difference how usable an application is on TV. You can also look, for example, I don't know if you've been at our UI talk, Nick talks a lot about zones on tablet applications and phone applications, and using UI fragments to define some of the areas. You can have different fragments that you can then reuse either as like simultaneously on a tablet or as different views, stacked views on a phone. And you can do the same thing with TV, where you can reuse the same UI fragments that you wrote for your tablet app, and you can lay them out in this column view on a TV. So when you display text, what we really ask is, think about on a TV you want to avoid lightweight fonts. And as you see here, it works on projectors, but sometimes on bad home TVs it doesn't work so well. Then also you want to break the text into small chunks that can be read and scanned quickly with one glance at the TV. You don't want to read lines, long lines. You want to keep it to about 5 to 7 words per line. Actually, if you look at this slide, this is intentionally actually a really bad example. So just to give you an idea, TVs, as I said, use a dark background. Looks much friendlier in your living room. Use some gratuitous animations. Users always like stuff moving around on their TV. Use bold fonts, short lines, dark backgrounds, and increase the line spacing between your stuff. So this looks a whole lot better on a TV than the previous slide would have looked on any home TV. So animations are always fun. Using sound, be conscious. I mean, Google TV is usually connected to a large sound system. Usually the volume is cranked up. You don't want to startle the user by like having huge loud sounds, so be conscious of the living room environment. Also, as an application, make sure you understand the Android Sound Manager and the Android Sound Focus. We see a lot of Android applications that do really amazing things like music players that play in the background, and I want to say we as technology literate people, we understand the concept of multitasking. I start my music player, and then I leave the music player. Music keeps playing. I go and I check my email while I'm listening to the music. For people who don't understand multitasking very well, they start playing music, then they go to live TV, and now there is music and live TV, and they're horribly confused. And we've actually had service calls that they can't figure out how to turn off music playing on their TV. So Android Sound Manager, starting with I think 2.3 or 3.0, allows you to have sound focus, and make sure your application handles the sound focus. If you lose sound focus, then stop playing music. For mouse navigation, yeah, you really shouldn't do that. Sometimes Android applications really don't work without the ability of touching stuff on the screen. Thinking of stuff like a map application where I select cities on a map. You can use the mouse for that, but what I found is usually by the time users have to navigate a mouse cursor on the screen, they're already annoyed. Make sure if you use the mouse that whatever they have to click on is really large, and it's large areas. It makes it easier. And provide UI feedback. It's not quite clear sometimes when you click on something, nothing happens. You click again, and then three things happen at the same time. One thing what you can do to make it a little more useful for users is actually using hover states. So you may be familiar with hover states for web design, mouse over, or any of those. But usually you can't do hover states for touch screens, because your finger is exactly where the little bubble would pop up. But they work really well for TV applications. So basically, in summary, make all the important stuff reachable in one click. Don't make key features like really low in the hierarchy. And another good way of making sure your user has a very efficient experience is sort of anticipate what they want to do and highlight the appropriate option. So that, and basically being able to clear up your back stack and make it easy when you click back. You don't just go to the previous activity, but you go to wherever it makes sense. Maybe you go to the main activity or the home of your application. The other thing to keep in mind for Android developers is if you use the search key in your application, be aware that Google TV handles the search key slightly different than regular Android. On Google TV, the search key will always take you to the global search. It will actually not take you to the application search. So what we recommend is make sure you have an on-screen search icon or some search button. And I was part of this decision, and we went back and forth if we should do that. And my argument was I want search to behave exactly the same way it does on a phone. And our UX designers tried to convince me that search should always go to the global search. And I didn't believe them until I saw at least 2 days full of user trials. And it's really amazing. There is a search key on the keyboard. The users look at the screen. They navigate an app. You tell them, OK, now go search for something. And they navigate and navigate. It never appears to them to actually look at the keyboard. It's like out of the 7 or 8 user trials I saw, none of the users actually was able to use the keyboard. And with a phone, you look at the screen, the search button is right there. It's a lot more apparent. So our UX guys basically convinced me that it's better to have a consistent experience. Whenever you press search, it goes to the global system search. And really encourage developers to put something on screen. Somebody who watches TV and navigates TV with a remote control never looks at the remote control. They always look on the screen. If you're unlucky, they're in a dark room, they can't even see the remote control. The other thing is just general common sense. Avoid just abstract icons. The problem is, again, that people who are just, maybe your in-laws are coming to visit and they have never seen a Google TV before, and suddenly there is an application they're not familiar with. They don't understand any of the abstract icons. Usually users are more familiar with like reading text or something. If you have a mobile phone application and you have the same user using the same app all the time, they'll click on it once and they'll figure out what it does, and then they go from there. But on TV, you have a lot more times you have a first-time user using your application. The other thing is horizontal and vertical scrolling. Really limit vertical scrolling for a lot of text. It's not really quite clear to users that they have to scroll left and right frequently. A lot more users are familiar with scrolling up and down. And if you need to scroll, make sure there is some indication that there is more on screen. Maybe you show an icon. Maybe you start fading out content towards the bottom. And think about what happens when you scale your content to 10x size. Does it still look good? So now here's a couple hands-on examples. Applications like, for example, Pandora. So in the upper corner, you see the mobile application. So that's what it looks like on a regular phone in landscape mode. And so when I worked with Pandora, we took effectively the mobile app and we just turned it into a TV app by reusing virtually 99% of all their code. All the playback code was identical, and all they had to do was adapt some of the high-resolution cover images. So instead of showing a small cover art, they're showing now like almost half a full screen. And they would also add play controls like the pause, forward buttons on the screen, and they would use the keyboard for it. So Google TV keyboards do have the hardware controls for playback, pause, rewind. And okay. So they have playback controls for this, and we encourage you to use the key codes. Also, if you look at, for example, the CNBC application, the developers there reused a lot of the mobile application. So what they had is they had a mobile app which just gives you your stock portfolio. You can configure your stocks. You can track if they go up, if they go down. And then they had a website which actually had a lot of video content and had a lot of like on-demand videos there, and so they combined the website and the mobile app into this TV app, which is very focused around their video experience. So what it does is it allows you to configure a portfolio, and you can watch which video clips are relevant for the stocks that you configured. And this is also a good example where if you create a user profile, you can change the stocks, you can personalize it on your phone, and then when you come home on your TV, you can then see the video clips for it. Third application where it was a little bit more difficult was the Panoramio application. So we took the Panoramio, it's like a photo application. It allows you to see photos that have been geotagged, that have been taken around you, and shows them on a map. And it's very GPS-based, it's very camera-based. So for this, we actually rewrote the application. And one of my colleagues wrote this Panoramio TV application, which, again, if you compare it with the mobile app, it's much simpler, it's much cleaner, less stuff on the screen, but you can see a slideshow of images that are relevant to you. So in this particular app, we also use the left side navigation bar. And as I said, this is one thing that when we developed applications for Google TV, we found that the left side navigation bar is very useful. If you develop a tablet application, you're familiar with the action bar. It's the thing on top of your application where you have shortcuts to actions that a user can perform. We have action bar APIs in Google TV. So if your app uses the action bar, it will display just the same way as a tablet. We found it's not the best user experience. We just do it for compatibility. It works. But the best user experience is really have this left side navigation bar. And we actually reused a lot of the action bar APIs. So if you as a developer, if you're familiar with action bar, then you can immediately pick up the left side navigation bar and you can start working with it. And we've actually open sourced it. So if you go to this short URL or you go to the long URL of code.google.com, Google TV Android samples, or you use this search engine thing, you'll find it. So you can take the source code. We have a library. You can include it in your own application. The good news is if you use this code, it will also work on a tablet, and it will also, basically your app will be usable on both tablet and TV. So if you have an app and you want to get started today migrating it to Google TV, one of the things you need to check is the manifest. As you know, Android Market, it figures out based on properties in the manifest who can install an app and which devices an app is shown for. So as I mentioned earlier, Google TV has some of the features which don't work that normal TVs or normal Android devices have. So if your app, for example, declares that it requires the feature for GPS, then it will not work. If it requires Bluetooth, it will not work. But in the manifest, you can declare those features as not required. And you can also add Google TV specific things to the manifest. I'll show you a few later. And you can then, at runtime, actually double check if those features are available. So one of the apps I wrote, actually, it normally relies on a camera, and it would allow the user to take photos and upload it to their Google Plus stream. But when they are on a TV, then you can't take a camera picture, but you can pick a photo, for example, from your gallery, and you can just fall back to this. And the way I did it is I just declared the camera feature as not required. It still works on a phone if there is a camera. And at runtime, I can use the package manager and query the package manager to find out if the camera is available. Then I can use it. If it's not available, then I just fall back. Also, when you set the on-screen orientation, use either unspecified or use landscape. If you do use portrait, then actually your app will not show up on market for Google TV. I also recommend if you have some critical assets, some things like the screen backgrounds or something that really should look really nice, is scale your assets in Photoshop. Yes, I said earlier that Google TV scales automatically all your assets, just like any other Android device, but sometimes you get scaling artifacts. And lastly, if it makes sense for your app, add support for the media keys. It's very convenient to use just a remote control to play, pause. So I talked about a lot of things that Google TV cannot do, which other Android devices can do. So let's talk now about things that Google TV can actually do better than other Android devices. And one of them would be, we have a channel lineup. So with Google TV, your app can actually figure out not what's currently on TV, but what's available on TV. So I know there is a lot of developers who want to write applications which are aware of what the user is watching, but honestly, I wouldn't want my applications to know what I'm watching all the time. So we don't have an API for that, but you can give an API that just gives you all the channel lineup, and then you can actually change channels to whichever channel is available. So you could, for example, write an app which changes to your channel. So for example, the Discovery Channel guys, they have a button where it says, okay, now watch live, and then it tunes to their channel. So for development, if you want to get started, you can download the emulator today, and it's available for Linux desktops. Or you can get an actual development device. And I know Google TV is currently not launching in your country. It's not available in Europe or in Czech. But if you can find a way to order it off Amazon, or I don't know, bring one back next time you're on vacation, having the actual hardware is kind of nice because it gives you a feel of the performance. So if you develop apps and you want to put them in market for, right now, the US, actually there's only one thing you need to do is, since, as I said earlier, Google TV does not have a touch screen, the one feature that you need to declare as false is the hardware touchscreen feature. So if your application does not do this today, we assume that by default you will not run on a non-touchscreen device. So what you can do is basically test your app, and one of the tricks, so when I'm out on the road and I don't have a TV with me, I actually use a tablet for development a lot of times. And if you have a Honeycomb tablet, you can, for example, pair a Bluetooth keyboard with your tablet. And then you can use the up, down, left, right navigation from your tablet. And it actually works pretty well. So you can test your app, see if it works without a touch screen, and then you can just add this tag in your manifest. The other thing is, if you want to only show up on Google TV in Android market, you can add a dependency to the com.google.android.tv feature, and if that is required, then your app will not show up on any other device. It will not show up on mobile devices. And if you want to, at runtime, figure out if you're running on a tablet or a Google TV, you can just use the package manager and query for the feature. So here's a full list of all the features which are available. And as you see, it's the TV feature, location network, USB host, Wi-Fi, and live wallpaper. So if you want multiple APKs, what you can do is you also have to change the package name, by the way, and then on your phone application, you will want to add the touchscreen requires equals true. So in this case, in this scenario, you would show up with a TV application which does not require the touchscreen, and your other application would require the touchscreen. So in terms of testing, my #1 recommendation is make sure you test for UI performance. Android applications usually run a little bit slower on Google TV, so you want to make sure you test that, preferably on the real hardware. Things like animations or transitions especially. or also videos. So keep in mind your home users may have different quality of IP connectivity. So they may have a low bandwidth connection. Make sure you either use like adaptive bitrate streaming, something like HTTP live streaming, or provide some configuration options where you can fall back to a lower bandwidth. There's also sometimes flickering or some other artifacts that you may not see on a tablet, but they become a little more visible on TV. Lastly, from my experience with Android applications, I would really recommend don't block the UI thread. I know we keep talking about this all the time. You should not, when you get called back from a UI thread, you should not do any network access. You shouldn't do like any large scaling stuff. I've seen applications that, for example, scale thumbnails as part of the UI thread, and even the scaling, it produces a noticeable lag. And the other two tips are don't block the UI thread and don't block the UI thread. And lastly, if you want to do some really cool stuff, actually use OpenGL. So the best applications that I've seen for Google TV so far, they use OpenGL for things like transitions, things like just moving stuff around. Yes, we have all the regular Android mechanisms for doing this, but on Google TV, since, I mean, one of the requirements was that it has to be a very low-cost consumer device. People always compare it with tablets and forget that tablets cost usually several times more than a Google TV hardware. We're really running on the limitation of the graphics hardware. Using OpenGL in Android gives you the best possible performance. Or you can also use RenderScript. So, as I said earlier, if you want to get in touch with us, you can either find us over on the demo here, or you can find us on Twitter, you can find us on Google+. For technical questions, actually, Stack Overflow is our preferred area because that's where all the other Android forums are, and you can find us there with the Google TV tag. We also have a Google TV Android Google group if you want to subscribe. That's where we post updates and news and what's going on. So with that, thanks for coming. And if you have any questions, yeah, let me know.
I have one. I have tons of questions, but just the most important. Do you have some user research about how people feel about QWERTY keyboard in their living room for controlling the TV?
Yes. So we do have some feedback that people usually look at this and they're like, is that a prototype or is that the real one? It's like, no, this is the real one. So you've probably seen the Logitech keyboard. It's a full-size keyboard. It's pretty big for a living room. The Sony controller is actually much more useful. It's like it's almost like a PlayStation controller. It's about the size of a small PlayStation. I think there is a huge opportunity for OEMs to innovate and to come up with really cool concepts. I think it's a matter of price versus usability.
Yeah, I was asking mostly about the usability issue because from my experience, I believe that most people already consider current controls complex.
Yeah.
And there are much less speed than on per keyboard. So I'm not talking about especially about the size, but about the controls in general. For example, I could imagine something like Siri, recently introduced, could be much better control, and you see that the QWERTY is the future here. So when you are developing for an ad, you always consider that user has QWERTY available. It's something different that when you consider that in 2 years' time you decide to use simpler controls and all this will be gone, that you can no longer count with QWERTY?
So for the foreseeable future, which is at least, I want to say throughout the next year, there's definitely always going to be a QWERTY control. So all the current OEMs that we work with, it's one of the hardware compatibility requirements, but we're always looking on how we can optimize this. And that's also why I said earlier, we have open sourced the protocol for remote controls. So we've already seen one company that took the protocol and created a much simplified user interface on smartphones. So I think there is an opportunity. If you think you have a good idea how to do this, take a look at the protocol. I also encourage everyone who has applications today and wants to develop apps for Google TV, come up, get one of our cards here. We have a sign-up form where you can tell us about your app and you can give us feedback. And some of our QA testers and some of our business development guys, they're always looking for new apps they can try out and play around with. So if you have an app that really works great, we would love to hear from you. Any more questions?
Is there any roadmap for that in terms of availability of the Google TV in Europe?
Yeah, I was waiting for that question.
Yeah, I was waiting for that.
So so as Google, we provide the Android platform and basically the Google TV modified platform. We are working closely with our hardware partners. And companies like Logitech, Sony, and we've also said we're working with Vizio, they have to look at which countries they want to launch the product in. So right now, I don't have any clear roadmap from them, but I would assume they're working on plans for 2012, and we'll see.
Do you know the entrance price tag for this cheapest box?
Yeah, so right now, the cheapest box that you can buy in the US, yeah, it's the Logitech, the $99 Logitech Review.
And it will run the same.
So all Google TV boxes that people have bought in the past will all be updated to the new version over the air. So if you buy a Logitech box today, or if you already have a Logitech box, it will receive the Honeycomb update. Yeah.
One question: can you use a microphone or a camera in applications? No, I would like my TV to be controlled by voice.
Right. So one application that we actually have, it's the remote control app. It uses the voice recognition on your phone, and you can do things like, speak a search query to your phone, and it will search, and then when you select the result, go back up to TV. So there is ways to integrate with search on the phone, with voice on the phone. We don't support camera directly, but that's also something we're looking to innovate in the future. And I mean, for Logitech, there is a custom camera, and they have some like video chat software, but it requires their custom camera.
One more question: can you write such application to interact with TVs, like some kind of ticker application, some kind of scroll bar with the live TV?
Yeah. So at this time, when you start an Android application, it takes basically full screen, so it does not overlay over live television. It's also a feature that we're looking at for future versions, how we can overlay output from an Android application. So the only way right now how you can communicate output is with the notifications. So it's little toasts that can show up while you're watching live TV. So I think one more question, and I think then we'll have to wrap it up.
Would you please disclose a bit more about the content protection and the DRM systems you are going to support?
Yes.
With respect to Widgets and secure media you purchased recently.
So Widevine is a standard DRM which is integrated in Google TV. So if you're familiar with Honeycomb, it is available to some extent on Honeycomb tablets, but it will be basically a first-class DRM on Google TV. So if you have Widevine protected content, that's going to work out of the box. So you don't need to do anything special.
And the secure media very much is others?
I don't know what our roadmap for that is, but
so Widevine is the primary.
Yeah. So if you do, for example, if you use the Flash player, you can use the Flash DRM mechanism. Not quite sure what it is. I'm not a Flash guy, but that's basically Widevine is the one we recommend currently. but I'm not a DRM expert. If you have any questions, I can give you my card. I mean, I can get you in touch with our content protection guys. Okay, thanks everyone, and thank you.